It's all good.
So on the good side, obviously Uber, one of the most innovative companies, ever to see the light of day, and certainly in the past, 10 years, completely changing how we move, has been under fire, and then may have come under its greatest fire with this piece in the New York Times over the weekend, which really, I think, all the other issues that had come out raised concerns about the CEO's personal behavior, maybe the one about them blocking law enforcement globally, raised some concerns. But this one really kind of, just for background for people who haven't seen the article unveiled that there was a meeting between Apple and Uber relative to Uber manipulating their app and leaving tracking code, even when the consumer deleted the Uber app out of the Apple operating system, in complete violation of all the agreements between developers and Apple. And it came to a showdown where Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, brought him in and said, you might lose your position in the App Store, in a devastating blow. And Uber agreed to stop the practice, but clearly had done it meticulously, planned, and for their own benefit, and in full knowledge of that limitation by Apple.
It was kind of interesting, right? Being schooled by Tim Cook, the young whippersnapper. An Uber company we love to hate. For all the reasons you just said. It's not like they're the first folks to try or be successful at hacking an iPhone. There are kids on college campuses all over the place that are doing that. But there's no question that this article.
But it's just borderline on complete recklessness that you would potentially. Bet the ranch, create such chaos that you literally might undermine the viability of your company if you lose the app applicability on the iPhone. It's probably 40% of your distribution.
But isn't this really a story? I think the story here isn't so much the thing with Tim Cook and what they did to iPhones. Let's face it. The story here, is Travis Kalanick being a bad kid. Not being grown up. Creating a culture that enabled misogyny and sexual harassment, and this is coming up over and over again in society now. We're just not going to tolerate it. And I think this story today in the Times is just an extension of that. Really, positing, do you have to be unethical to be an innovator? Really, I think, the question in this article. And you know how I'm going to answer that. I don't think you have to be unethical to be an innovator. There's a human side to innovation, and we're going to hold our leaders accountable for that. And Travis Kalanick is being held accountable. We'll see, how this plays out. I think he's under enormous pressure from his own board of directors here, regardless of how impressed we are with the innovation, regardless of how we love to take Uber cars because it makes it easier for us to get from A to B. We're still not going to tolerate the leader of a major company, that treats people that way. And he's either going to have to change really quickly if it's not too late.
But hasn't the environment said that almost after every faux pas? It was 3 or 4 years ago where a little girl walking with, I believe, her mother, she was 5 years old in San Francisco, was run over by an Uber car in between trips. And his utterance after that wasn't on an Uber trip, not our responsibility. That was the entirety virtually of his comment.
And there was a time where if you were successful and making a lot of money, I think you could get away with it. I think those days are numbered. Right? I really do. I think you're going to see them come. Look what happened, to Bill O'Reilly this week. We could have that conversation, right? We try to make the story about something else, But you know what? In the end of the day, we're just not going to tolerate this behavior anymore from any leader.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to get away with it, you're not.
Right.
And Travis Kalanick is not going to get away with it. He just isn't. And we'll see whether he survives this or not. Maybe he will. Right? Maybe he will. It won't change the fact that his idea was innovative.
Right.
And yeah, he had to work hard and play at the edges, and we can debate, what was, ethical or not about some of the things they did to grow Uber.
Yeah.
But innovators have to sometimes push on rules, right? Because that's what innovation takes. When it rises to an unethical standard, right, and there are just some standards we're not willing to breach, and this is becoming truer and truer, every day. And we see big iconic leaders that come crashing down in a matter of weeks, because of these things today.
Now, I assume that after any one of these faux pas, and there's now, 5 or 6 pretty significant issues tied to his behavior, is that he's still too important to that company.
Well, listen, I say
I took an Uber this morning.
right? But that's not because of what he did, right? In fact, there's a lot of people that are signing up for Lyft because of the way he's behaving, and that's probably what's driving the board to act, right? Because people are going to stop advertising, sponsoring. They're going to stop investing in the company. It's going to get harder to raise money, and I just don't think the tolerance is what it has been. Although it's very easy, to say, Kaplan, what are you talking about? Look at the national election. Look at what's gone on.
Sure.
Like, we've got to sort this out as a society.
Right. I mean, you make the point about Bill O'Reilly, but
Absolutely.
Donald Trump,
Absolutely.
similar behavior was unveiled.
Yeah. But you know my point. My point of view on
Right.
that. Not that we talk politics, in this segment, but enough already. Right? At some point, we have to have leaders that we can look up to, that have ethical standards, that innovate and help us change in ways that respect us as humans. Because if we don't, what's going to happen are more and more examples like this, and these are the things we've got to work on. The human side of innovation matters.
Right. So, talk a little bit about what's the line? What's the demarcation line? Clearly, early on, there was hints that they were manipulating on a most basic level behavior against their competitor, Lyft. And there was a series of incidents that were unveiled where, if somewhere between gamesmanship and unethical. I always... when you talk about gamesmanship versus cheating, the ball, you're playing basketball and you threw the ball away, but you point that the other way to keep the ball. Now, who the ball is off of, but you're trying to convince the ref. So that's gamesmanship of some degree, right? Because you're trying to keep possession of the ball. What is the ethical standard of?
Well, first of all, as a society, we set ethical standards. You tell me in the business that you've grown up in the media, one person's gamesmanship is another breach in ethics. Right? If you're in the newspaper business, how far did you go to get a story?
Right.
And where did you cross the line between healthy competition and gamesmanship
100%.
and what seemed unethical? This is a bar that we set as a society, as a community, and we set it through the norms, and we set it in the way we call out behaviors that we're not happy with, and we need to be able to sort out, when is this just competition, right? And we allow and respect healthy competition, right? And when does it cross the border?
But we also love winners,
Right.
right? We celebrate winners. I mean, the CEO of Uber is well known. The CEO of Lyft, I don't even know if I've ever read his or her name.
But who's celebrating today? This is what I mean today, that this is changing. I think the days of we celebrate winning at any cost, right? And when it starts to cross these boundaries, we still celebrate winners anyway. Right? Who's celebrating the CEO of Uber today? Right? This is the company we love to hate. They have a huge PR problem. You know what's going on social media right now. They are losing customers to Lyft, by the thousands. Right? And,
they had 200,000 cancellations, deletions of their app in February.
Right.
So,
Right. And all they're doing is arming the Luddites, right, who say we should have stuck with taxi cabs that weren't delivering great service.
Right.
Right. I want to separate out the innovation conversation from the conversation about ethical standards and what we hold ourselves accountable to in society. Otherwise, what we end up doing is saying, let's never innovate, let's never change.
But let me push back a little bit. Is there, I think it's healthy to have the conversation because the disruption is changing the rules.
Right.
So if there's a norm, we're challenging the norm as
That's right.
disruptors. Right. And, I'll give you a perfect example in our business. We have a rule here that we're not going to go forward with a story without two on a story that has unnamed sources. And we're going to only go forward when we have two. They can't know each other, have talked to each other. We have huge confidence that they're independent. And we believe that they have the expertise to make that assertion, and one is not related to another.
But let's talk about that standard.
Sure.
So whose standard is that? Is that a
Well,
prevailing standard that, it's not law?
No, it's
right?
not law.
It's not an ordinance.
No, it's not an ordinance.
It's your policy
Right.
here.
Sure. Right.
And is that a policy that's shared by journalists? Or like
Could be. It's more. It morphs all the time. There's certainly, I've seen articles in the competing daily newspaper in which they went forward with one source.
Right.
And that journalist felt comfortable that one source was reasonable enough to move forward with it.
Right, so I think you should be explicit about that.
Yeah.
Right, you should let your readership and your viewers know these are our standards.
Correct.
When you see something on our site, right, or you read something, this is the standard that we impose on ourselves.
Right.
Right. If the next journalistic enterprise doesn't have that same standard, right, then I should be asking them, what are your standards?
Right.
So that I can, in a discerning way, say, what am I going to trust more?
Right.
Stuff I see here or stuff I see there, right? We don't need a law to determine that.
No.
We need you to be explicit. We need leaders to be explicit. What are our values? What are the things we will not do? And that should be both internally to our employees. What are our values and standards? And we should share them transparently. And then we should be accountable when we say these are our values and we create the pretty poster that says these are our values. If we see behaviors that aren't consistent with what you said, we should call you out on that, right? And then you should be honest about it and get better and better and improve. What we need to do better as a society is being clear. What do we value? What do we hold you accountable for? Right? Because we can't expect some third party to do that for us. Right. And that's true here in the Uber conversation. And I believe one of the things that we value as a society, not just here in America, but around the world, is increasingly we place this value, particularly around sexual harassment and misogyny. We're starting to say enough is enough. I don't care what happened historically, I care about what happens today. And if you don't behave aligned with that, we are calling you out. We will stop buying your product and taking your Uber car and deal with that, because we on social media can get a lot of our friends, right, to feel the same way. So corporations all of a sudden are being forced and pushed to a set of standards that go way beyond what any set of statutes or legislation could say.
So, okay, but to your earlier point, Donald Trump got elected president of the United States. Right?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
And it was pretty clear, certainly in the case of the tape, that he had some opinions, and some other media. Whether or not the assertions by some women, none of those had gotten litigated, none of those had gone to civil trial. So you take those with a grain of salt. You're never quite sure if those are politically motivated or postured. But clearly his own words were pretty clear that he had some point of views, certainly at different points in time, that none of us would be comfortable with accordingly. And that was 6 months ago. I think He's
Yeah.
100 days in.
Right.
Bill O'Reilly survived for an amazing period of time.
Yes, he did.
From the first clear indications. And that whole network has been facing charges about sexual harassment, very explicit sexual harassment
Absolutely.
for years now, a number of years, and may or may not. We'll see in the ratings if Tucker Carlson is
Right.
performs just as well as Bill O'Reilly did in that.
Let me
that news hour.
take each one of those. So first of all, without getting into a polarizing political
Well, you can swap in Bill Clinton.
You know,
Yeah,
no, of
right.
course that's the comeback for what I'm about to say.
Right.
All I'll say is shame on us.
Yeah.
As a
Right.
country, for making the choice that we did, if for no other reason than the one we're talking about today, because I don't like what that says, to my daughters and my granddaughters.
Right.
Right. I don't need to hear anything else. That was me personally.
Yeah.
Right. On the Bill O'Reilly thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It took way too long, but now it didn't. And now he's gone.
Right.
And I think it took the new generation of Murdochs, the next generation down. Rupert's kids that are now getting in position to run this big, global
Behemoth.
enterprise, that are asserting their influence and their values on a series of decisions.
Cynics say that he has a regulatory approval. They have a regulatory approval in the UK.
Yeah.
That is what motivated their dismissal.
I say nonsense to that. Not that that isn't true, but I say when you look at the financial impact and pulling the rug out from under the O'Reilly show,
Yeah.
and how painful that is financially.
Yeah.
To say Tucker Carlson's going to replace that time slot. I mean, please, really? I mean, that's just not going to happen. But they were willing to pay that price for the future of the enterprise,
Yeah.
and that would not have happened. Yeah, we should have made a different decision as a country, but that's my personal
Will Uber
opinion. But,
prognosticate? Will Uber make a change at the leadership position?
I think they will continue to try to recover this guy, but I don't think it will work. I don't think it'll work.
So go back to your point.
Yeah.
How many recoveries do you need
Yeah.
until?
I don't get a vote in this.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not a shareholder in the company, and I have a meager following on Twitter. So if I vote, I say enough already.
Have we hit the enough already?
Yeah, I believe we have. Take this guy out. He's richer than than most of us will ever be.
Right.
And put someone in there that can change the image and move Uber forward. I don't believe they'll do that right away. I think he controls too many of the shares. I don't think the board will do that yet. I think they'll do some things to try to recuperate his image.
Well, they got him a driver.
Right? But I will tell you
they got him a driver.
that if you ask me to predict it, I will say it will not work. That ultimately this guy will end up moving out as the CEO because they'll continue to lose too many customers, and what they've built is too important and has too much growth potential left, and they'll end up making a change. That's my guess.
So that being true, is there inherent in these innovators, these disruptors, that the intellectual capacity, the energy, the boldness, the unwillingness to proceed against all odds in many cases, is there, to some degree, going to be a trade-off? Is there an inherent trade-off
Here's what I think the trade-off is, right? Because I'm not willing to accept that in order to innovate, you have to be unethical. I love the Mark Cuban quote in this article this morning that you recall, where Mark Cuban said, the best thing about Travis Kalanick is he will go headstrong through any wall that you put in front of him.
Right.
And the bad news about Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, is he will go headlong through any wall or any obstacle to get where he's going. So you follow that through, you say, is there no place that an innovator won't stop in order to bring their innovation forward to the world? My answer to that, most of the innovation folks that I hang with and that I respect understand the human side of this. They understand that one person's innovation really affects another person. My quote is, everyone loves innovation until it affects them. And we need to be sensitive to that. We need to be sensitive. Today, I don't know if you saw this, I read an article about Target, and the CEO of Target, retail is under a world of hurt right now, being disrupted by Amazon and other online retailers. They let go their chief innovation officer. They had a big initiative called the Store of the Future, and they canceled it. How sad is it? It's like the newspaper industry. They waited way too long. They have to tighten up and innovate only in the context of their current stores. They can't invest in what the future holds, which is, to me, the death knell of an industry or a company. And then somebody locally here came back on Twitter and said to me, they have 350,000 employees. That when Target goes down, which you'd have to say at risk for doing, 350 people who need those jobs, are going to lose their jobs because of an innovator who created online retailing. So does that mean we shouldn't innovate? No, it just means that if we're going to innovate, let's do it with our eyes open about what impact that it actually has on people.
And it wasn't long ago that Target was held up as a leading innovator in the retail space because they created a better shopping experience, better design, cleaner stores, better sight lines. It was kind of like going into a Nordstrom's because you could actually see down the places rather than a Kmart or some of the
we held them up as they were the goal. They were the North Star. But look how quickly that worm turns. If you're not innovating every day, and you're not paying attention to the disruptive forces around you, one day you're the hero target, and the next day you're worried about going out of business and 350,000 people, that's a lot of people, that are going to be worried about their jobs, that we don't have the education system and the community support, to help them stay relevant and to make it through that kind of transition. So this is what I mean by the human side of innovation. It's not a buzzword or a phrase. We've got to help people be prepared to reinvent themselves because these business models don't last as long. These industries don't last as long as they used to.
Business Insider or whomever you want to look at has the list of the companies that are most likely to go out of business in the next, by the end of the year or by the end of 18. Let's use an example. Sears and Kmart are on that list every year. It's amazing they've survived because I think they've been on that list for the last 3 years. You don't see, I certainly don't see any initiatives about how are we going to deal with the hundreds of thousands. Certainly it's got to be 100,000 Sears and Kmart workers and what's in the future of for their fate.
This takes us back to what are communities doing, what are states doing? Because if we don't create an education system, and we don't create platforms for people to learn how to reinvent themselves and to stay relevant, we're going to have this problem. What do you think happened to all these people up and down the Midwest that got displaced when the industrial companies and manufacturing companies went out, or here in Rhode Island?
And the problem is too many of the responses by government is to teach skills, and the skills that they often teach by the time the person gets through the training program are not necessary in and of themselves.
Amen to that.
And they're not learning how to learn per se, rather than that's a K through 12 function, not so much a job retraining program because if you milestoned right now, what's the job to retrain somebody who got and it's going to take 24 months to make them competent at them. 24 months from now would be our guess as to what's going to be the place that you
know
want
how
to
many
train
people
them for.
I go out and I speak all over the world, and almost every talk I give, I ask the question, raise your hand if you're doing exactly what you started out to do when you went to school. And there's always one or two wise guys who say, yeah, I am. But most people in the audience say, we've had to reinvent ourselves multiple times. And then how come we're not teaching kids, our youth, the most important asset we have, to be able to reinvent themselves, exactly to your point, we need to be teaching them the life skills, to how to be a leader, how to work in teams, how to effectively communicate, how to share a point of view, how to get other people to share your point of view, the things that are necessary no matter what happens to jobs. Instead, you're right, what we're doing is narrow threading to some job that isn't going to exist when they actually get there. We need to completely reimagine what education is for, or else we're going to keep reliving this cycle that you and I are talking about, right? Because yesterday it was the manufacturing companies,
Right.
Tomorrow it's the retailing companies, and the next day it'll be some other company that today we think is going to be here forever.
Right.
And it's just not so. It's just not so.
Well, certainly, there's probably no better example than Deepwater Wind CEO Jeff Grabowski, who, 10 years ago was trained to be a senior staffer for a Republican governor,
Yeah.
and 10 years later is at the cutting edge of reinventing energy policy in the
It'll go to
United States.
Jeff's head.
Yeah, we won't.
We don't want to do that now, right? we don't want to do that, but yes, he has had to reinvent himself.
Yeah.
And he did it intentionally.
Yeah,
He's a
absolutely.
pretty smart guy.
Right. He went to all those night classes. how to become a CEO of offshore wind.
Yeah, because if you had asked him back then, are you going to be running a wind energy company? He would have predicted that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he would have predicted
that. Appreciate all your insights, and I know at Twin River they've marked and they've got the odds running on all of your projections tonight.
Oh yeah. No,
Uber CEO.
I'm great at the prediction. My timing isn't always right on.
One thing we'll talk more as we get closer, but I think one of the best kept secrets in Rhode Island, I think some know, is BIF, and I just want to touch on that for a minute or two. You mentioned Mark Cuban. He's been in Rhode Island. How many times has he biffed?
He came 1 year. It was so much fun to have him. He was such a gentleman. You talk about the human side of innovation.
Right.
Here's a guy who we see as this iconic guy.
Right.
We know from Shark Tank and others, and the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. This guy was absolutely delightful, was incredibly thoughtful, and fit right into BIF and our BIF Summit, because we focus on the human side of innovation.
Right.
If we're going to innovate, let's do this with empathy, for the people that are affected by this.
Yeah.
And let's be more inclusive about how we think about this. And he was right there in that conversation, as have iconic innovators around the country and the world. Over now, this will be our 13th year doing it. We learn from them. We're inspired by them.
Yeah, great. And any previews yet? Is the growing name of interesting speakers being let out?
Well, just this week. I don't think we've announced it formally yet. But
So are we announcing it
well,
right here?
I
on Go
tweeted
Local
about
Live?
it because I couldn't resist.
You couldn't control
but
yourself?
My good friend Richard Saul Werman, the guy who founded TED, who's a close friend and personal mentor to me, used to live here in Rhode Island.
He did?
Now lives in Florida.
Right.
But I was talking with him the other day.
Just sold his house.
He sold the house
I
in
think so.
Newport.
Yeah.
They've got a beautiful new home. His new book is coming out this summer. It's called Understanding, which is so classic RSW, Richard Saul Werman. And he's going to come to the BIF Summit in September here to Providence to share the story of his new book. So I'm pretty excited.
So despite your tweets, we're going to claim that it was announced here
There you go.
on Go Local Live. It was the first
My
podcast.
team will be so happy. My team will be so happy.
Listen, thank you so much,
Always.
as always. I thought it was
Always,
a great discussion.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most interesting things going on in business in the United States right now.